Hi everyone, my name is Sid with Sid's Knits. This will be a much different video from the previous videos I've had because I will solely be talking about why I'm no longer able to knit. Knitting is my outlet. It is something that I do at the beginning of my day to the end of my day. I knit and crochet for about 8 hours a day. And for the past 2 months, I have been unable to hold a knitting needle or a crochet hook without being in pain. So I hope in this video, I'm able to raise awareness of knitting and crocheting related injuries, some of the things that I had never heard of. And in time, I hope that I will be able to return. But in the meantime, I'm excited to share my journey and where I am now. Beginning in August, I was just enjoying knitting. For those who do not know, I am based in Los Angeles and I've been knitting and crocheting since 2019, right before the COVID-19 pandemic. And this was the activity and the hobby that I turned to every day since then. Professionally speaking, I am a social worker, and in this field, we see a lot. We deal with many difficult cases, emotions, and knitting really became an outlet for me that at the end of a difficult day, I would be able to turn to my hobby, to be able to take my emotions, to reflect, and transform it into something beautiful. It is incredibly therapeutic having that repetition, being able to get to the point where, frankly, I didn't even need to look down. I was able to make one right, knit two together without looking. And it became a mindless activity for me, but something that was much more. It was my meditation and my outlet. So in August 2025, in this point in my journey, I was knitting happily. I was also crocheting, and I was crocheting these two rattles, which I will show here, using a 3.25 millimeter crochet hook. For those who may not know knitting or crocheting, we use a crochet hook in crocheting and knitting needles for knitting. I was using 3.25, which is quite small. For reference, this is going to be 10 millimeters, holding it in my hands like such. This is going to be a 1.90 millimeter crochet hook. So you can see the difference. I was using a 3.25 and I was holding a lot of tension in my fingers. Although I am right-handed, I crochet with my left hand, and I was holding the crochet hook with tension of my middle finger and my index finger. Over time in this project, which I would say lasted about probably 3 hours, I began to notice some intense pain in my middle finger. And I thought perhaps I was just gripping the crochet hook too hard. I needed to take a break, but I did not. And unfortunately, I did not listen to the messages that my body was giving me. I began to have that pain after I finished my project, and it continued for the rest of August. My finger began to swell, and it felt a little warm, and I felt a noticeable line connecting from my palm to my middle finger. I also began to have a locking sensation where my finger would suddenly be locked in a bent position, such as this, and I would have to use my other finger to essentially pop it back into position. When it first started, I thought that perhaps I had cracked a finger, it made a sudden noise, it would heal with time, but unfortunately it did not. And it became more frequent, and it became to the point where, unfortunately now, my finger will not bend. It will simply stay up. I can move it down. If I push, that's as far as it will go. And it has started to wake me up at night where my finger will suddenly lock and it will stay locked. The most recent incident involved me actually having to physically pop it back quite painfully, And I think that's when I knew that I needed to seek a referral from my doctor and to meet with someone who specializes in trigger finger or finger injuries. I had never heard of trigger finger. I didn't know what it was. Obviously, it's utilizing your finger too much to the point where inflammation, tension reaches a boiling point, and the tendon will become stuck. All throughout September was quite difficult, where my finger was locking and popping multiple times a day, up to 5 to 10 times a day. I would wear a splint, I would ice. I started finally listening to my body, but I was still knitting, wearing a splint, thinking that my finger will be okay, but still needing that outlet. Still knitting, not so much crocheting, but still knitting and utilizing that hand. In the beginning of September, I met with a trigger finger specialist who did x-rays and ultimately diagnosed me with trigger finger. I was given a cortisone injection shot at the base of my middle finger, and I'll show a picture. It was quite swollen the next day, but I felt some immediate relief. It felt like the inflammation had gone down. I was able to move my finger with a little bit more ease, but I could still not touch my finger to the base. And unfortunately, when I make a fist, you can see this is as far as my middle finger will go. Following the injection, I had about a month until my second follow-up to see how I responded to the cortisone injection shot, if it was able to reduce the inflammation and ultimately be able to release the tendon or the pulley, whatever it may be. But the finger kept getting worse and worse. At this point, the entire month of September, I was not knitting. And if I was, I could only go for about 2 minutes before having pain. My finger, it seems like, is stuck in a locked position where I'm not able to bend it, and it has severely impacted, frankly, halting my knitting and crocheting. I have had to adjust and find different ways to express my emotions. For instance, decorating my yarn room behind me. It was something that I probably didn't have the time to do before, but trigger finger has let me have this time where I'm looking at different options. I'm looking at different ways to express my emotions, and I'm hopeful that over time I will be able to knit again, but unfortunately it is still a question mark. I go for my second follow-up tomorrow, where I will have another cortisone injection shot with the hopes that it will finally solve this problem. But ultimately, a surgical intervention may be needed, where they will make an incision at the base and be able to manually release the pulley. At this point in the journey, I have not knitted or crocheted for 2 months now. And as someone who was knitting and crocheting 8 hours plus a day, it truly feels like my passion, my love was taken away from me. I did not listen to my body. I did not listen to the cues that my body gave me, which I think, moral of the story, always prioritize yourself, always listen to the messages that your body gives you, and also make sure that you splint, that you rest, that you massage, especially in your hobbies. You don't realize the physical impact or the toll that it takes. And in retrospect, I wish that I had done that right when I noticed that my finger was having that pain, that I began to ice or use heat to be able to give it that time to naturally heal. I unfortunately am looking at about 6 months, perhaps up to a year, of not knitting or crocheting. I am truly devastated, but I'm hopeful that over time I'll be able to return to my favorite activity. I continue to write patterns. I continue to look at patterns, look at different creations that I'd like to make, but unfortunately I cannot execute that now. I hope that this story raises some awareness of what some of the complications of knitting and crocheting may look like, to always prioritize yourself and ultimately to be able to say, I need to take a break. If you've ever had to stop doing something that truly is your passion, your hobby, or a way for you to cope, I see you. I see how difficult it is. And I hope in sharing the story, even though I'm not able to knit or crochet, that will be enough. That will raise awareness, that will allow us to focus on the things most important, our health and our well-being. If you have had knitting related injuries or trigger finger or crocheting related injuries, I hope that you'll share your story in the comments to help others in our community to share what this complication is, what it could look like, so that we can focus on what matters most. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and I hope to share a more positive update soon.